and welcome to the podcast where friends discuss environmental policies from around the planet. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Planet Policy Pals. We're so excited to be here with you guys. I'm Ala, and I'm joined here by my co-host Adwa. Hey girl.
Hey, how you doing?
Fantastic, amazing, wonderful. These are all lies, but I'm doing okay. How are you?
Good. This world is right now, the way that it's going, lies are working. So that's what we're doing. Today was a great day to be in Pakistani politics, I will say. It was so much fun. You know, I didn't even feel the need to watch TV, like anything that was like dramatized, just because like our political system is just... Yeah, our assemblies got dissolved today. So, fun. But anyway.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Between Nigerian and Pakistani politics, we'll never run out of material.
Never.
Anyway, we're also joined here by a very special guest. We're keeping these interviews going. Katrina Dutton. Hi, Katrina.
Hi, everybody. How are you guys doing? It's so nice to have the opportunity to talk with you all. Been definitely following your guys' journey throughout the start of your podcast to now, so it's really awesome to have the opportunity to be here with you guys.
Thank you.
That's exciting to hear.
It really is. So, everyone, please remember to rate and review us. We're begging you, okay? And we're still on our break, quote unquote, because you guys still get content. I still post occasionally on social media. Please go listen to our past interviews, guys. We've done so many at this point. We had the interview about potakots. We had climate finance, integrity. We had climate finance in Pakistan. Talked about a lot of cool stuff, women, agriculture, and we talked about textiles in Nigeria and waste in Abia State. So a lot of content for you guys to catch up on. Find us on Twitter, Planet Policy Pal, Instagram, Planet Policy Pals, and like our Facebook page. Before we get into the episode, though, let's talk about Newsly. Newsly, as we always say on this podcast, is the revolutionary app that lets you listen to news, podcasts, and pretty much the internet all on one app. Everything from sports, science, Bitcoin, and pop culture is available, and it reads it to you. They have trending podcasts from over 50 countries, including us, of course. So you have even more ways to hear our lovely voices.
Yeah, and we don't get paid for this, so we're still doing it, which means that we have started using this app. And let me tell you, I'm a newsreader and I love it. Like, browse from tons of topics and start listening today. Head to www.newsly.me and use promo code PlanetPals to receive a 1-month free premium subscription courtesy of the awesome Newsly team. We will link it in the description, and the code is on our website as well. That is newsly.me and promo code PlanetPals. Go rest your eyes and gain some knowledge, you guys.
Yes, do it. All right, so today we are discussing the impact of acid rain and rising acidity levels on the ocean as we know it. So, of course, our guest is a marine biologist. She is an ocean science professor at Eastern Florida State College, and she's also the podcast of Let's Talk About the Ocean, Katrina Dutton. We're so excited to have you. I know we already said that, but we're really super excited to have you, Katrina.
Oh, thank you guys so much. It means the world. I know it's funny with all these things going on in life. I'm kind of started in the sea turtle world at first and did research, then went back to education. I've done informal education, formal education. So it's been one of those things where you bounce around, but you still stay motivated to do the things that you like to do.
Exactly. It's important, you know. There are so many journeys to take when it comes to the environment and things like this science. So it's really interesting to see your journey. A little background on acid rain, because you guys always ask us to explain the science and the technical bits. Acid rain is basically rainfall or precipitation that became acidic due to pollution. And the thing about this rain is it changes the chemistry of things like seawater, lakes, forests, all of that, because you have an increase in acidic compounds, and that lowers the pH of water. Things that are acidic have lower pH. And when pH of water is low, you reduce the ability of what we call the upper ocean to store carbon. Basically, when we release things like nitrogen, sulfur, and atmospheric carbon-based compounds into the air, they settle in that rain. and they form acidic compounds such as nitric and sulfuric acid. The upper ocean is what we call, another name for it is the sunlight zone or ocean skin, because it's where you have all the motion and the warmth. It's the top part. And that's where you also have a lot of mixing due to this motion, waves and things like that. When pH rises, you have oxygen depletion, effects on the food chain, and you have excess carbonates, which, as we will discuss in this episode, can cause major issues to marine life. The thing is, though, pH in seawater varies a lot, and most marine life, they can handle the fluctuations. It's not a big deal for them. But when you have sustained rise in pH levels due to acidification, so you go from once in a while fluctuations, and now you have the problem for marine life, which is lifetime exposure, because now the pH is changing and it's a long-term sustained issue. Oceans are an important reservoir for things like CO2 because they absorb a significant quantity, about 1/3 of the CO2 that we produce from our anthropogenic activity. That's all the stuff that human beings do. And they kind of buffer climate change in that way. But now rising carbon emissions are putting the ocean at its capacity for this, which, Audra, can you expand a little bit on these effects?
Right. When all these gases that Ala mentioned, when they enter the ocean, they dissolve in salt water, right? And one of the things that they form is carbonic acid. Now, this carbonic acid, it breaks apart or disassociates, like Ala talked about, bicarbonate ions that form in the ocean along with these hydrogen ions. So what the acidification does, it results in an increased concentration of hydrogen ions and a reduction in carbonate ions due to the absorption of the increased amounts of carbon dioxide. Now, all the sea life, which is clams, mussels, crabs, and corals, they all rely on carbonate ions to grow their shells and thrive. But this added carbon dioxide, it has significant effects on the ocean. Right now, surface waters are 30% more acidic than they were at the start of the industrial era.
Which is crazy, you know what I mean? Like, that's quite a lot when we think about it.
Yeah, like, and it's not happening just once in a while, like you said. This is just, it's a thing, right? And it's happening at a faster rate than at any point in the last 66 million years, and possibly even in the last 300 million years. So talk about crazy.
Significant. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like if you look at projections, they show that by the end of this century, ocean surface waters could be more than twice as acidic as they were at the end of last century if we do not really reduce our carbon emissions. And this uptake of atmospheric carbon dioxide is also occurring at a rate which is exceeding the natural buffering capacity of the ocean. And what is the buffering capacity? It is the ability to resist a change in pH, right? It is actually quite large for the ocean. In general, it contains around 38,000 gigatons, or which is like 38 billion tons of bicarbonate, carbonate, and carbonic acid. Now, this means that the entire ocean can absorb a lot of carbon dioxide without becoming too acidic. But the increased carbon dioxide levels, marine life has to deal with decreased carbonate availability and increased acidity. And this rising concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is driving up ocean surface temperatures and causing ocean acidification. And yes, warming and acidification are different phenomena, but they do have pretty similar detrimental effects on the marine ecosystems.
I think it's really interesting that you point that out, because we sometimes think like, well, this is one problem and this is another, but things are connected. Ecosystems are very interconnected.
It's a cycle. It's the fun part about all of it is that it all just cycles all together.
Exactly.
You know, who better to hear it from than you, because you have been researching marine ecosystems and their conservation for a very long time. Like, it seems like you loved it so much. You actually went to Australia for your master's, and you are now teaching these young minds at Eastern Florida State College, right? So we assume, like, and even like one of the things from the ocean that has come out is the Great Barrier Reef, right? So we all assume that it plays a really huge role for any marine biologist who goes to Australia, right? So how do you think your time there furthered your journey as a marine biologist?
So it actually was a kind of a full circle event for me. So I went and visited New Zealand and Australia when I was in high school. I had, the blessed opportunity to be able to go over there for 2 weeks with an organization called Discovery Student Adventures. And kind of visiting Australia was one of the major events in my life that kick-started my whole journey in marine biology. So the first place we went to was Reef HQ, which is a local, it's a local aquarium that is managed and operated by the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority. And they have one of the largest living Great Barrier Reef ecosystems within the aquarium. So it's an open top aquarium. It's not like this it's a giant tank, but it's not this giant tank that's covered by a roof or anything. It's actually, it's going through the connection between open air and ocean, and it's one of the coolest places to visit. So, you know, we went snorkeling, hiked on Magnetic Island, which is a local spot over there in Townsville, and I got to just snorkel the Great Barrier Reef, and that was the driving factor of, hey, I think I want to get into this. You know, I grew up around the coast my whole life and was always on the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean, and that's where it all started. And it was full circle when I went back to Australia to do my master's degree, because I always knew I wanted to go back. And I think at the time that I applied, I was like, well, I guess, you know what, I might as well choose Australia. And I think it was a fantastic spot to choose, because so my original intention in life was I wanted to be a coral reef scientist. I wanted, you know, when I was in high school, when they would ask, well, what do you want to do when you get done? I was like, I'm obviously going to be a marine biologist, because I was inspired by my marine science teacher when I was in high school. And I went,
that's so sweet.
So she was, that was a full circle event too, because I got to cover for her while she was on maternity leave, and I taught her marine bio students after I graduated from Florida Tech. So
full circle indeed.
It's been full circle twice, which was really cool. And so, you know, after I was still figuring out my life, and I used to work for the Smithsonian Institution, and I did a lot of informal education through them in an aquarium. So my life has been centered around, you know, science communication and education, and research, and, you know, anything really dealing with marine ecosystems. But I wanted to do coral reef ecosystems a long time ago, and then all of a sudden I fell in love with sea turtles when I was in college, and I was like, all right, that's it. So here we are, still, you know, trying to keep going in the sea turtle world. But, you know, being there, and I took classes that were located and did labs on the reef, and it still sparked that interest and really brought back that love for, you know, why I started this whole journey in marine biology and why it's all important. But it also just diversified, you know, my knowledge of not only just Australian ecosystems versus Florida ecosystems in the US, but also getting into kind of the management side of things, and really taking a look at learning what they do over there and things we do here, and kind of, you know, possibly maybe incorporating ideas, you know, that I could bring here to the States that really just kind of set a nice tone for marine conservation.
That's really exciting. I think I especially loved what you said, you know, incorporating this idea of like research and science, and also you being a science educator, covering for your teacher, and now being an ocean professor at Eastern Florida State, which, by the way, it's so cool that all of us here are alumni of Florida Tech. They should be paying us for this promo. Go Panthers.
Seriously though.
For sure.
Where's my like check in the mail?
I know, right? Instead of asking me for donations.
Right?
Yes.
It's so true. It's like, I don't have the money right now to give you $5, but, you know, here's a dollar.
But being a science educator, we know it can be challenging. I myself taught science for a little bit. I taught middle school, and it was a journey, let's say that. But it can be challenging keeping students engaged regardless of their age. So is there anything you do now as an educator that you think would have kept you more engaged at that age? Although it sounds like you were pretty engaged to start with.
Well, I think the thing is too, so since I teach college age, I teach general biology and oceanography. So it's a neat little mix that I have, because I have a diverse group of students between, you know, I have dual enrolled students, the ones that are still in high school and taking classes for, you know, college credit, and that it's obviously, you know, I'm teaching a class that I have a major in, and they're all there just to get a credit. So their level of enthusiasm is like, all right, you know, I don't know how I feel about getting into this field. And then I have the few students that are very, very, immersed into the topic, ask me a ton of questions, and, try to really get a sense of what the field is about. And then my biology class is very different because there I have a lot of students wanting to go into the medical field, and a lot of them are students that were students at one point, took some time off, came back, or they just graduated high school and now they're coming into college and they're just trying to get their core courses out of the way. But for me, my teaching, I guess, philosophy is that no matter what you're doing and no matter what you're learning, you really should just try to make it fun and simple, because you can get so wrapped up and so overwhelmed with all of this complicated knowledge that you forget just if you break it down and simplify it as best as you can, then, you can better understand it. Now, teaching, and I used to teach high school when I first graduated from undergrad, and that was a whole whirlwind, but I had everything set up for me, where starting at a college level this year, I've had to do everything from scratch. So it's been a huge learning curve, but my oceanography students, it's funny, I'll throw in random activities throughout the week on like a whatever day that I have a lecture that I'm teaching. And a lot of them, they're just sitting there quiet. They're like, oh, it's just going to be her talking, no problem. And then all of a sudden I'm like, all right, guys, so we're going to get into groups of 3, and you guys are going to actually talk to each other for once. And it's hysterical because they start moaning and groaning about it, like, but then they actually get really into it. And when I was in grad school, it was funny, I had one class where we would have like debates and things about different topics, and so I've been doing that with my oceanography students, and a lot of them been getting into it, which is awesome, and they're more passionate about it than they think, and I think it's just a matter of pushing, giving them a little bit of a shove, and they get through it. But it's just trying to really showcase the important topics. So last week we were talking about primary productivity, and there was a spot where we were talking about the reef systems. I was like, hey, did you guys hear about what's going on in the Great Barrier Reef right now? They're like, no. I'm like, okay, I know you guys are on TikTok. I know you guys are on social media and all those things. How could you not miss that? And
good tool.
Yeah, I know, right? And I was like, I know you guys are watching those, the things that you're glued to, like I'm glued to too. But so I pulled up videos and showed them, and they were like, oh, wow, I didn't realize all of this was happening. I'm like, oh, yeah. This is the craziness that's going on in the reef right now, and they could tell my level of my voice level changed because I saw some of them start to fall asleep. And I'm like, all right, this is important. So. Yeah, and I want them to, get involved in the conversation, and I have these, they're kind of out of the blue assignments sometimes. I call them article discussions, and my first intention, and I feel bad for them some days, but my first intention was really just to, have them start looking into the literature and teaching them at the age, since I know some of them are mostly, are about thinking about college down the road. So I'm having them, get into understanding the types of methods that a lot of your research does, whether it's watching a YouTube video and writing down the methods and trying to get immersed into the topic. Or this one assignment that I had this past week for them was, okay, you look up any, peer-reviewed journal that you're interested in, and here's a list of topics that you guys need to look at, and just pick something you're interested in, find one article, and just look at the important bits that you need to understand. So with that, like even that centered around their assignments, I've been making them do, so I didn't give them any tests. They have quizzes, which is nice for them, but no like final exam or midterm and all that, and I'm making them actually be presenting on a topic and an issue that is interesting to them, that they find interesting, so that they immerse themselves into this whole topic that they can kind of learn about and take charge on.
That's good.
Yeah, especially like the techniques that you've used. It's great that we have educators like you who are actually focusing on having people learn. But as a listener and also someone who makes an environmental podcast, which is let's talk about the ocean, you've probably nodded your head in either agreement or disappointment when you've like listened to our show about marine life. You're probably like, dude, we probably messed up a few of the facts. So please feel free to correct us and tell us if are there any episodes that stood out to you, either as a biologist or someone who also just dabbles in science communication.
Well, I think all of your guys' stuff sounds pretty great. I mean, I feel like you guys do an immense amount of research, so, I have no complaints from here in the Peanut Gallery, but I definitely liked...
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. I mean, I feel like because we all did research-based degrees and environmental degrees, so you know that you have to look at your peer-reviewed sources and all those good things. I definitely really liked one of your episodes, which was episode 36 about the climate crisis, and I feel like that's something that it's a heavy topic of conversation right now in the world we live in, and I bring it in all the time with my lesson plans, because even in my general biology class I bring it in no matter what we're talking about, because it's still such a huge kind of it affects everything. So it does. It's one of those things that we can't escape it. We're seeing it now, for example, with what's going on with the Great Barrier Reef. We're seeing it happen now, and it's, we have to talk about it. We can't just leave it to the side.
No, for sure. And so talking about, this whole climate crisis, the environment, let's focus a little bit on the acidification issue. So Audra talked a little bit about how the ocean is changing acid-wise, especially since the last industrial revolution. The ocean surface right now is already 0.1 pH units lower than it was before the industrial revolution, and research suggests that the ocean will become another 0.3 to 0.4 pH units lower by the end of the century, which is about 100 to 150% increase in acidity, which is wild. So having lived in a country with the largest coral reef, you probably know how bad this is for corals, especially, like you said, with your research that you've been doing for quite a while. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about why corals are important and how this rising acidity can actually be bad for the corals?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, oh God, those numbers just about break my heart when you think about it, because it gives me the heebie-jeebies just thinking about it. Because
it's really frustrating. Yes, I agree.
Because the hard part is when not everybody has the experiences where you can actually go out, stick your face under the water, stick your whole body under the water, whether you're diving or snorkeling. Because I ask my students this question all the time. I was like, how many of you guys snorkel in here? I get about 3 or 4 hands that go up, and I'm like, what are you doing? Go get your face in the water. Like, go do it. But, it's... Yeah. So I didn't get to dive as much as I wanted to when I was over there, obviously because of, the lovely thing that we're living through, which is the pandemic. But the times that it was rough, because I had this whole intention in 2020 to actually go diving more, go different places to dive, and I just didn't get around to it because of my minor thesis, and with the pandemic. But the times that I did go diving, I mean, the spots of the Great Barrier Reef that were untouched, or they were not dealing with major amounts of bleaching, were just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, you could see these huge, the bommies that they had, and all the Acropora species, and just it was one of the most amazing things to see, and knowing that if we don't change the things that we're doing now, that all will disappear. It hurts my heart because it's such a beautiful ecosystem. I mean, our corals really help to indicate and tell us what our ecosystems are doing. I mean, they hold not only just the huge home for the biodiversity of so many different species, they allow for smaller fish to hide, for invertebrates to hang out, and it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't go out and see any coral reef, really, like here in Florida, even if people don't travel all the time, there's still some small coral reefs off the coast that they can go visit, and even going to an aquarium that has coral, that's such a huge thing. But I think the hard part is that we have to kind of look at, what can we do now to change for the future? And with our acidity levels rising and knowing that those coral species are they're going to bleach out, it's hard. It's hard to even just fathom, really.
It is, because you think about things that have existed for a long time, sometimes centuries, sometimes even more than that. And like you said with the bleaching, right? Corals with acidification, they're not able to build the shells. Them and other calcifying species, for the listeners, those are the species that use the calcium carbonates to build up their shells. Like Audra said, things like mussels and clams as well. But
well, with all of those calcifying species, I mean, those are obviously the basis of the food chain for a lot of different species. I mean, a lot of our fish species, right, and even our larger organisms, they need, in order to build a lot of our vertebrate species. Sorry. Their bones require calcium in order to stay strong and to build the necessary nutrients that they need to survive. And those changes, if we lose the one of the most important parts of the food chain, those species are gonna dwindle as well too. They're not gonna be able to survive. I mean, for example, our sea turtles, like a lot of our loggerhead sea turtles, munch on a lot of our mollusks and hard shell organisms because that's what they eat on a normal basis. And if they don't have that, they're left with nothing. I mean, it becomes tricky because everything is so interconnected, especially when you're talking about the food chain and all that. It's, even like our down to our zooplankton and pretty much all of our plankton, anything that builds some sort of calcium carbonate or calcium shell, they're highly affected by everything going on.
That's a good point that you make.
And thanks to you, we actually now understand why species that actually have shells or parts that need calcium carbonate are affected by this rising acidification. But how is fish affected, especially in their growing stages?
So by no means am I an expert in fish ecology, but I do know from my time at working in aquariums, I've seen different stages of their growing process. So obviously we know they start out as larvae, their planktonic stage, and they're absorbing and using the necessary chemicals in the water column and pretty much in basic water quality to help them move from a small little itty bitty planktonic stage to what we call the post-larval stage, where they're really cute and clear, and you see these little baby fish swimming around in the mangroves, and then they grow and grow and grow and develop their whole entire body and become these juvenile fish, and then move into adulthood. And not only that, but with the acidity levels, we start to lose the importance of breeding grounds, or for example, like seagrass beds. They're another really good example. Even though they're not a calcifying organism, they're a really good example of a juvenile nursery that allows for a lot of these smaller fish or organisms to survive. And when we start to see those ecosystems dwindling and dying off because they can't survive with either the lack of oxygen in the water column, or they're going through hypoxic events in some areas, and hypoxia just meaning that it's the lesser amount of oxygen in a dead zone. A lot of our species start to either they have to migrate to a different area, or they'll dwindle down and their numbers will reduce down. So you have to kind of think about, with fish, if we're seeing lower populations of fish, that's saying something about our water quality and how our ecosystems are doing.
Yeah, like you said, I think a lot of people don't think about that when it comes to things like hypoxia, which can affect them, and just in general when things are growing. Most people don't think about how young animals, whether it be marine life or terrestrial, have to combat things that maybe adult ones would not. It's just like with human beings, you know, children are more susceptible to certain things than full-grown adult humans.
Exactly. It's one of those things where it's like, it becomes a depressing topic almost, because, you know, you go through the motions of explaining it, but then, you know, realizing kind of the extent of it, you're like, okay, yeah, now we gotta start making some changes here, because I want to go swimming through a seagrass bed and see all these cute little fish moving around.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's something that we want to keep. So we've talked a little bit about how this is a problem. We've talked about what happens as a result of it. So let's talk a little bit about what we can do. We know that a major way we can further reduce this acidification in the ocean is, of course, by burning less fossil fuels. We bring that up all the time on our show. I don't know if people are tired of us saying it, but we'll never stop, so it's what it is. But we also have to work on adaptation as we mitigate. One such adaptive solution uses giant sea kelp, which, by the way, you guys, is also sustainable and it's delicious. I'm a big fan of kelp because the thing is, as it grows, it captures carbon from the water and it produces oxygen, which combats the lack of oxygen that we can get as a result of acidification. Not to mention, it absorbs nutrients like nitrogen from runoff in order to grow. So a study in California of an area that experienced low pH and high nutrient levels due to wind and flow changes showed increased pH and oxygen concentrations, as well as balancing in the temperature near the surface because there was a kelp forest around there. So these were observations that they made from within the kelp forest and around it as well. How viable of a solution do you think kelp forests can be if they're replicated in different parts of the globe?
So I think the thing was, I mean, kelp forests are they're beautiful because they hold, I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen the videos of kelp forests, but they are one of the coolest ecosystems to visit. I've never personally had the chance to hop over and swim through the kelp forest, A, because that water is freezing, and B, it's cold. You need at least like a 7 mil, at least for me, I'd need at least like a 7 or 8 mil wetsuit just to swim through it, but or a dry suit if I want to dive. But you know, they're helpful. They're extremely helpful for the ecosystem. I mean, I don't know how they would fare well here in Florida just because of the difference in ecosystem type and also, you know, how warmer waters get. But I think they're an extremely viable source just because of just the immense of, you know, clarity that they provide for those ecosystems over there. And I always kind of relate them to seagrass in a way. When you have really heavy, you know, seagrass beds that are thriving and doing well, you're seeing your water quality get a lot better and you're seeing your oxygen producing more because obviously they're photosynthetic species, so we're seeing that production of oxygen raising, so that's really helping the water in the area around it.
Okay, so that means that we could have something happen good soon. We could see some kind of changes. It's always interesting when you talk about adaptation, which is great. We have to adapt, but like mitigation as well is very important. So thank you for that. Honestly, thank you for coming on our show in general.
No, you're welcome.
I really enjoyed what you said about the diving. I've never dived. I want to, but I just have never gone around to it. Yeah.
So while Australia has a lot of research-oriented solutions and is usually committing large sums to environmental science and technology, and they're always in the news about it, the emissions in the country remain high and not much has been done to reduce those. In fact, researchers in the country regularly complain about the lack of funding. And it also sparked an investment of 2 billion Australian dollars that were spread over 15 years in 2020 from the government that should help businesses and technologies.
Yeah, but the thing is, however, the most recent Climate Change Performance Index had both Australia and the US at the low end of the spectrum in terms of lowering GHG emissions. So, unfortunately, the US is at the low end of the spectrum for a lot of things environmentally, but the GHG emissions is a problem that they both shared. How do you think being that you've studied in Australia, worked there, and you are from and live in the U.S., how do you think that public interest in conservation and marine life, especially when it comes to emissions, differs between the two countries, Australia and the United States?
I think the hardest part is it comes down to the research. So it's really kind of, when you think about it, so Australia has a very smaller population of people compared to the US, where there's a lot more nowhere in the middle. And then in the US, we have some nowhere, but everything is densely populated. So that's kind of where you see a huge difference. And right now they've had, I think it was the Reef 2050 plan through the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority. They're really putting a focus on research, especially because of having the Great Barrier Reef right there, and because it's so, it's a popular tourist destination for a lot of people. I think that's a hard question because, you could say that we're trying to do everything we possibly can here, but there's so much lack of funding that a lot of programs get that don't have the opportunity to really put a focus on the important things that we do need to focus on, which is, it's such a tricky situation because, even just the small things that we do for the environment, it still seems like it's not enough, but it's a matter of kind of getting everyone on board, starting at the local community level and kind of building our way up.
Right. I think it's very important that you mentioned funding, because where we put our money as a society is very indicative of what is the most important to us. And lowering GHG emissions is definitely a challenge that every country on Earth, I think, is dealing with right now. So we got to put our money in the right places.
Yes.
For sure.
For sure.
And obviously, so the picture that's behind me, this is of an area in Australia, just kind of neat to have that behind me. But we see our ecosystems. Our ecosystems are really big key indicators of how our Earth is doing and how our local environment is doing. So when we see those emissions increase, you'll see that in the local ecosystem with just all of the different changes and the weather. And a really good example of that right now is obviously with the heat index over there is incredibly high, so they're seeing problems with bleaching on the reefs, and some people are like, oh, well, the reefs are fine because they're all these pretty colors, so it's totally okay, we're all good, she'll be right. But that's not the case. The corals stress out just like we do, but we just, they show different type of stress. And yeah, so it's it becomes one of those tricky topics where you can be passionate about something, but if you don't have the funding or the money to do it, it's kind of one of those things where you go, okay, here we go.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? Exactly.
So we know you're on a break right now with your show, but can you tell our listeners about it and ballpark when we might talk about the ocean again?
Yes, I have been slightly putting it off for the past year.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, I think it was just, one of those things where it was a great idea to start with, but then life kind of happened, and you can only do so much as one person. I'm hoping I can get it back up and running. It's a matter of trying to find the time. But the whole purpose of it was because I am passionate about ocean research and I'm passionate about, the topics that come with ocean research. It was, little kind of thing. And actually, you guys starting your podcast really inspired me to want to start a podcast. So,
oh my gosh,
that's so cute.
So, because I saw, obviously, with you as an AWA, and I was like, oh, that's actually a really cool idea. So, I was like, all right, maybe I'll get into it. I wasn't doing much at the time. I was working part-time here and there, so I had a little bit more time on my hands. But I think recently with, teaching oceanography and teaching biology, I'm like, okay, I can do this. I talk about this for an hour and 15 minutes twice a week, and I teach 4 days a week. I think I can do this again. So I'm hoping I'll get it back up and going. I want to try to start putting together a little bit more, infographics and things on Instagram. I made, currently the Instagram is private just because I haven't been touching it too much. But I do post a lot on my professional Instagram, which is Trina the Ocean Scientist. And that's where I do post a lot, especially, related to sea turtle stuff, when I can actually get in the field and do stuff with organizations, and, just sharing my thoughts and what I'm thinking about different environmental topics that I come across and just about my life in science. So, yeah, so it's kind of, it'll get there. I'll bring it back, hopefully.
Hopefully, we look forward to that. And guys, be sure to check out Trina the Ocean Scientist on Instagram so that you can learn more about sea turtles and marine life. I know our listeners care about the environment. We do not cover animals a lot on this show. It's not exactly our expertise. We try to bring it up. So here's another source where you guys can get even more of that info.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also some other people as well that I follow that are great resources too. So it's a nice little collaborative effort of different people. But I just kind of give my view on it and, things that I'm passionate about, because passion is key, right?
It really is for anything, really. That's pretty cool that you do that. And honestly, that is my biggest takeaway from this, is how you are actually so cool. And I am so glad that somebody like you is working in this field and researching. And also the way that you're letting these young minds really, I think your methods and your techniques are really interesting and very creative. And we really hope that we can find new scientists. These young people are going to grow up to follow your path. It'll be very cute to watch.
It's neat to see, because I have a couple students that'll come up to me here and there, and it was I got an email from one of my students at my biology class, and it was a nice little heartfelt moment where they told me in the email, and were like, oh, I want to say I really appreciate the way you're teaching, because there are times where I'm like, oh God, how am I doing as a professor, as a teacher, or an instructor, because, it's hard to get feedback sometimes, but she said, you've made biology exciting, and it's been nice to kind of have that enthusiasm. And I was like, oh, thank you so much, as I'm starting to bawl my eyes out behind my phone.
That's so cute.
Yeah, so it's nice to see a lot of them grow, because like I said, I have a huge range of students from 16 probably to 47, and everybody is so different.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a huge range, and everybody's so different, but if I can at least inspire 2 or 3 people, I've done my job.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so on this show, we do this thing, which is that where do we rank the issue of whatever we're discussing? And since we're discussing acidification in the ocean, where would you rate it on a scale of 1 to apocalypse? Apocalypse would be, are we losing all marine life? And 1 would be that, do we have time left? That we're fine, we don't have to worry about it, so chill out, guys. But apocalypse is, you guys, what are you doing? We're dying.
So it's definitely not a 1. I still think we do have some time, but it's more in the middle where we need to, try to educate a little bit more on it and really get people excited about it, because then they'll go, oh, wow, okay, I do want to see, these beautiful reef systems around the world. I do want to see these species survive. So it's in that middle where it's teetering between, okay, yes, we do have time, but we also need to make sure that this is an important topic that we talk about with people. And it's good because a lot of places and a lot of education programs and, aquariums, they do put that point home. And I think a lot of people are going, oh, okay, this is actually more important than I thought it was.
It is quite important. I think at this point, it's high time that we take it more seriously.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a solid 8.5. I realized saying this that a lot of my rankings, I've been 8.5, but I'm going to give it a
Girl,
8.5.
I don't know how your rankings work. I cannot believe you gave something. I don't remember what you gave an 8.5. And I'm like, okay, this is an interesting choice. When literally the expert is telling you it's the middle.
Apocalypse.
Okay. Oh, you said Proton was 8.5.
I'm saving apocalypse.
You cannot.
A 7 works. 7 works.
See?
Yeah, 7 and 8.5. Okay.
Yeah. It's teetering.
Okay. Well, thank you for supporting Ala, because that's never me. Anyways, but we talked about giant kelp as a means of mitigating this issue of acidification in the ocean. So you guys, if you would also like to jump in and help Ala in her beliefs, please tell us where you rank this. But also, we would like to know that if any of you have read or investigated any other interesting solutions to this problem that we talk about, please let us know. You know how to find us. We are enjoying the hell out of these interviews, and this is our last one of this break, but do not worry, we will have some more in a month or so. Thank you so much, Katrina, for coming on our show. We actually had a great time. It was very, very, very enlightening, and you really kept up with the spirit of this show, like really broke it down, and I think our listeners will really appreciate it. So thank you so much for coming here.
Oh, you guys are welcome. I appreciate you guys having me on and thinking of me too. I appreciate that a lot. So I'm still, like I said, I'm still young in my career, but passion drives everything for me. So any time that I actually get the chance to talk about marine life, it's usually it's a whole lot of fun.
Well, I'm glad you had fun, because we absolutely had a blast. And guys, you can find her on LinkedIn as well. Really look her up. She is amazing. We really appreciate the constant support that you all give us by listening to us. So please rate us, review us. Ala begs, not me, but here I am. And please send us audience questions.
Wow.
Find us on Twitter at Planet Policy Pal, Instagram at Planet Policy Pals, and like our Facebook page. Remain awesome, and please enjoy the upcoming summer. And as always, keep learning, pals.